This happened to my friend back in 2010 when she was about 13 years old. She used to live in this one neighborhood that was way before, well, the big move, which happened at least couple years later after that. Now, my friend, for the sake of this story, we're gonna call her Amy for the sake of the story. Amy was about 13 years old, and it was around Christmas time at the time of the story. You know, one of the biggest holidays that a lot of kids can have, the joy of giving and even getting presents and surrounded by family that love you. Yeah, Amy loved Christmas, and she was home alone one night as both her parents went Christmas shopping. And basically, her brother was out doing some stuff, so Amy was home alone for this time. It was snowing a bit heavy, so the roads were pretty much covered in snow, and it was going to take them a little bit longer time to get home. So, with nothing to do, Amy decided to watch some TV, bored out of her mind. At that point, everything seemed to go smoothly until she heard a knock on the window. She turned around thinking that it might have been her brother or her parents, but she didn't see anybody. She just continued to watch her show, but halfway through one of the episodes she heard the knock on the window again. Now Amy was starting to get more curious. She walked over and asked if anyone was there, but there was no answer at all. There was just silence. She then decided to think that maybe somebody was playing a prank on her, so she went outside to try to scare it off, but she couldn't find it. Due to the snow being heavy, the fact that there was too much snow, it was really hard to even think about it. Now, Christmas was about a week or so, and Amy was going to be having, well, a school vacation from it in a little while. But since it was the weekend, she didn't really know where everyone was. So she just sat back down and continued her show. Not long after, 10 minutes later, she heard a knock again, and this time it came from a different window. She then looked out, and she could see that there were footprints in the snow. Now Amy was starting to get curious, so she got outside and called out if anyone was out there. But there was no voice or answer. She followed the footprints, but it led to the back of the woods, which wasn't far from one of the neighbors' houses, since they lived near a forest preserve in a big city. Yeah, not surprised that. But she couldn't find the figure, and she called out. Since it was nighttime, she couldn't see anybody, so she decided to go back to her house and make sure the door was locked. As she was doing her usual thing, she then heard the knock again, but this time it came from the downstairs. This is when Amy started to get curious, so she ended up thinking that it could be someone attempting to break in. But she was too scared to go downstairs, as the person could have saw her. Well, at least that's what she thought it was a person. She ended up calling the police, and when the police arrived, the man was already gone. Of course, she told her parents about it, and her dad the next day installed security cameras. But ever since then, Amy had never saw that man again, and she doesn't know if that was a man or a woman playing a prank, or someone attempting to break in her house. But she's never stayed home alone for at least till she was 16. Well, that was actually one of the scariest encounters that she thought she ever had conceived to find out. She doesn't know if this guy or person is still out there or not, but she's still scared to this very day. Back when Violet, who was a good friend of mine, used to live, or in this case, used to go up to her grandparents' cabin every Christmas. Now, at the time of the story, Violet was about maybe 13 or 14 years old, and she was in the cabin all alone and isolated from pretty much everyone. Since the grandparents lived there, they go there up for every Christmas and every holiday to be exact. So Violet was mainly home alone at times whenever their grandparents were going to go out or something like that. Being the boring kid that she was, she didn't really pay attention too much, as this happened about maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Violet would just sit on her butt and basically play video games and sometimes even watch TV. She was watching an episode of Kim Possible when she all of a sudden got some creepy vibes going on in the place. She heard some footsteps walking around in her cabin, thinking it might have been a bear or something. Occasionally, one time that she found a bear in the yard, and There were a few times that she saw a deer and elk and moose, possibly a bobcat or a wolf passing by here, but the footprints sounded a lot bigger than she thought. She thought it might have been maybe just someone, probably hiking through the woods, didn't realize that the cabin was private property. Her grandparents' private property owners were basically strict about people trespassing property without consent. So Violet just continued to watch her movie. And at this point, she was starting to get very tired when a loud bang woke her up. She looked around, thinking that it might have been her grandparents or her parents being home. But to their surprise, their cars were not in the driveway. And now Violet was starting to get very uncomfortable. She walked up to one of the windows, but she couldn't see anybody, even with the lights illuminating what was about a foot or so in front of it. Now Violet was starting to get really scared, so she decided to continue on, just watching her TV and stuff like that. So, of course, she just decided to continue on with more stuff to go on about her day. She then later decided to head to bed, as she was pretty tired and just didn't want anything to do pretty much with anything else, as she was really tired and had a really rough day. But when Violet was just about to go to sleep, she heard what seemed to be footsteps walking towards one of the doors. She thought it was her grandparents or her parents coming home, so she ran downstairs to see. Now, her younger sister was about 8 and she was already asleep, but of course Violet was still wide awake. Since she has paranoia, she looked outside, but she could see a figure. It looked to be about maybe pretty big. She thought it might have been a deer, elk, or maybe a moose passing by the area, but when it stand on its hind legs, she realized that it wasn't, and she covered the window with the curtain quickly. She thought that thing was going to bust down the window, but it let out a shriek, and then it ran out of sight. How she knew about that was when she looked outside. She couldn't see the figure anymore, and saw some tracks, so she went out to go see who it was. She didn't know if that was actually someone pranking her, or if it was some cryptic creature. She didn't tell her parents or even her grandparents about this experience, as they would probably say it's fake or you're just imagining things, etc. Violet never encountered that creature again, and ever since she still goes back to the house, she still wonders if that creature was still out there. That really scares her when she thinks about it. Still though, she still doesn't know if this thing, whatever it was still out there. But she really does not want to run into this thing ever again. And she still goes to that place now that she's older, but she's never seen that creature. She still attempts to figure out if it's still out there, but she can't seem to find it though. This happened about maybe at least a few weeks ago, and this honestly happened to me. When I was home alone with my brother and my dog, basically, my mom had to go out to do a couple of errands, so I was left to tend to the house. It was near the evening, as she wanted to get some stuff done before she had to crash for the night. So as I was home alone, I was basically just playing on my computer, watching some YouTube videos, and even chat with some of my friends who were doing a live stream. Suddenly I heard my phone ringing, and I thought it was odd since no one would call it this late into the night. It was basically about maybe 8 o'clock or so. So I picked up the phone, expecting it to be a scam call or maybe someone trying to pull a prank or someone looking for my mom. I said, "Hello," but there was no reply. I'm thinking maybe it might have been someone pulling a prank on me. I said, "Hello, who's there?" I asked. But there was no one there, and I started to get very suspicious, so I decided to think maybe it's probably just some hoax, or maybe just someone trying to pull a prank, so I hung up the phone. The next few minutes, as soon as I hung up the phone call started to ring again, and it was the exact same number, but I couldn't trace the number even though I looked it up. Then I said, "Hello, are you there?" I replied, but there was no answer still, and I started to get confused. Why would someone call me if they weren't, planning to talk to me? This was honestly a really weird creature. creature of some sort trying to get contact with me? No, my mind was just messing with me. I'm thinking someone was just pulling a prank on me. So I said, "Look, buddy, can you please answer me?" I said, sounding a bit annoyed. But there was still no answer, and then they hung up. I then hung up back, but then they called again, and I picked up, but absolutely heard no answer on the phone. I even showed my mom the number, and she tried to contact the police about it. They couldn't trace the number, and it said that the phone number has gotten disconnected, did for some time actually. They're not sure about it, so I guess I could just say that I am not sure who was trying to call me that day, but there was no way that number could be still active if it was disconnected. Then what I thought might have been possible was that what I experienced that day was completely paranormal. In 2016 on Halloween, something really freaky happened, and I honestly didn't really understand what is to be the case. So I'm just gonna explain my best of my abilities. I was about 18 at the time of this story, and unfortunately, something really freaky happened on Halloween. I was stayed back while my mom took my brother to go trick-or-treating, which of course my brother was about maybe, I guess you could say 15, and my mom decided that she could take him out trick-or-treating this year. So while she's out trick-or-treating with my brother, I decided to stay home and hand out candy as I was bored out of my mind, didn't have anyone to go with, and I simply just didn't know what else to do. So with that being said, while I was handing out candy and dressing up, so I decided to play some video games. As I was playing video games on my computer, occasionally when the door knocks, I usually go up and answer the door, revealing that there are trick-or-treaters there. I handed them lots of candy, so everything was all good, and my mom and brother still hadn't returned home. Shortly after the young kids came by, there was a couple of teenagers that came over to get some candy, so I handed a couple of candies to the trick-or-treaters that were adults. But surprisingly enough though, it wasn't until one dude showed up, at least shortly before my mom showed up. Now this guy, seeming to be dressed up as a Michael Myers costume, he knocked on the door and I got up to answer, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said. The mask looked really realistic, as if he bought it from the Halloween store. So I decided to hand him some candy, and then he said, "Thank you, sweetie, I'll be on my way." I got very uncomfortable with this dude. He sounded like he was in his 30s. While I was 18, I noticed something sticking out of his back pocket was a knife. With that being said, I ended up deciding to tell my mom about it. I texted her and told her the description of the man, of what he looked like and what costume and stuff. She told me to call the police, so I did. And when the police came by my door, they asked me some questions about the dude, and I gave explanation of who he was and what he looked like. I did explain the best that I can. So the police did say they would let me know on who the guy was. About at least a week later, the police updated us that they caught the guy trying to break into an old elderly couple's bedroom, trying to steal some jewelry. Luckily, the police were called as one of their neighbors saw the man breaking in, and he's been taken to jail for house breaking in, burglary, robbery, and etc. So, I am just glad that he didn't even target me or anything like that. I was surprised he didn't even pull out his knife at me. But, I have no idea what would have happened if he did pull a knife on me. Chances are I wouldn't be alive today. As I'm writing this, I still wonder if this guy is still in prison, and I really hope he still is. To this dude who tried to have a knife to try to hid it from me to strike me if he didn't get what he wants, let's not meet again.